So, Bitcoin. We've all heard the name, right? You've seen the crazy headlines, and you've probably watched its price just go on an absolute roller coaster. But what is it, really? Is it actually the future of money? Is it some kind of digital version of gold? Or is it all just a massive speculative bubble that's just waiting to pop? Okay, let's really dive in and try to figure this out.
And this question right here is really at the heart of the whole debate. It's pulled straight from a discussion with actual economists online, and it just perfectly captures that skepticism that's always swirling around Bitcoin. I mean, people see its price shoot to the moon and then crash back down, and they're left wondering, what is this thing actually worth? To get to an answer, we really need to look at the three biggest arguments for what Bitcoin is.
All right, so first up, we have maybe the most famous argument of them all, that Bitcoin is digital gold. The whole idea here is that in a world where everything is going digital, we need a digital asset that acts as that ultimate safe place to store your wealth. Just like real physical gold has for thousands of years.
And when you first look at it, the comparison actually makes a lot of sense. Just like gold, Bitcoin has a very limited supply. It's also really difficult to mine or produce more of it. And because of those two things, a lot of people believe it can hold its value over the long haul, especially when traditional currencies are losing their buying power to inflation. This number, 21 million. This is everything for the digital gold argument. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Ever. That's it. It's literally written into the code. So unlike national currencies, which governments and central banks can basically print whenever they want, Bitcoin has this absolute unchangeable scarcity, and that is its single most powerful feature.
And yeah, making new Bitcoin is not easy at all. It requires this process called proof of work, which is really just a technical way of saying that supercomputers are burning massive amounts of electricity to solve these incredibly complex math puzzles. This difficulty is totally by design. It's meant to make creating new Bitcoin expensive and slow, which kind of mirrors the real-world blood, sweat, and tears it takes to dig physical gold out of the ground.
But, okay, let's be real. The analogy isn't perfect. For one, you can't hold a Bitcoin in your hand. At the end of the day, it's just lines of code on a global ledger. And its price, well, it's famous for being incredibly volatile, swinging up and down in ways that gold just never does. On top of all that, governments around the world are still trying to figure out what the heck to do with it, which creates this really uncertain and messy legal landscape. So the key takeaway is, while it shares some really important traits with gold, it is a very different beast.
Okay, so if it's not quite digital gold, what about the second argument? The idea of using it as actual everyday money. Well, for this, we have to look at the biggest real-world test case we've ever seen, El Salvador's incredibly bold experiment to make Bitcoin an official national currency.
And wow, did this happen fast. In June of 2021, the law was proposed and passed within days. By September, it was official. Bitcoin was legal tender. But take a look at that last date. By early 2025, the whole experiment was pretty much rolled back as part of a deal with the International Monetary Fund. It was a really audacious, but ultimately a very short-lived chapter in Bitcoin's story.
I mean, you got to admit, the goals here were huge. The big idea was to bring this massive part of the population, 70% of people who didn't even have bank accounts, into the financial system. They also wanted to cut down on the crazy fees people were paying to send money home from other countries. And of course, they wanted to make El Salvador a global hub for tech and investment.
So that was the government's plan. But what about the actual people of El Salvador? How did they feel about it? Well, this poll from just a few months in tells a pretty clear story. If you add it up, over 70% of the population had little to no confidence in Bitcoin. That is a massive hurdle to overcome when you're trying to get people to use a brand new form of money for groceries and rent.
But here's where it gets really interesting and kind of complicated. Despite that low confidence, a huge government push, which included literally giving away $30 in Bitcoin to every citizen who downloaded the app, led to this massive adoption of the official digital wallet. In just 1 month, more people had a Bitcoin wallet than had a traditional bank account. So it shows the law definitely had a real impact, even if that ultimate goal of widespread daily use didn't quite pan out.
This brings us to our third and honestly the most critical view of Bitcoin. What if it isn't digital gold? And what if it isn't really practical as a currency? What if it's just a bubble, an asset whose value is based on nothing more than hype?
So to really get this argument, we have to talk about something called a productive asset. Think about a stock in a company, right? You own a tiny piece of a business that actually makes stuff, earns revenue, and hopefully generates profits. That company has real, intrinsic value, and it can share those profits directly with you through things like dividends.
Okay, now let's flip that.
A non-productive asset is, well, the opposite. It doesn't generate any income. It doesn't produce anything. Its value comes entirely from one single thing: the belief that you can sell it to someone else for more than you paid for it. This is what people call the greater fool's theory. And critics argue that this is exactly what Bitcoin is. You're just betting that a greater fool will always be there to buy it from you at a higher price.
So if it is a bubble, why hasn't it just popped for good already? Well, this is where that famous quote from the economist John Maynard Keynes comes in. The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. Basically, bubbles can be fueled by pure belief and speculation for a very, very long time. Just because something seems irrational doesn't mean its price can't keep going up.
So where does all this leave us? Well, we're left with three completely different identities for Bitcoin, and no clear winner. The honest truth is that the story of Bitcoin is still being written, and its identity is being decided right now, in real time, by investors, users, and governments all over the planet.
I mean, just take a look at the legal situation around the world. It is all over the map. In the United States, it's treated like property, like a stock or a house. The European Union has its own big, comprehensive set of rules. We just saw El Salvador try making it currency and then hit reverse. And then you have a superpower like China that's banned it outright. There is absolutely zero global consensus on what this thing is.
Okay, so let's pull it all together one last time. What is Bitcoin? We've got three competing identities. Is it digital gold, valued for its rock-solid scarcity? Is it a currency, a bold but maybe flawed experiment in the future of money? Or is it a pure speculative bubble, driven entirely by hype and the hope of selling to the next person in line? Right now, you could argue it's a little bit of all three at the same time.
And that really brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? For an asset like this, which is part technology and part social movement, its value comes almost entirely from our collective belief in it. Its future identity isn't set in stone. It's going to become whatever we, the market, the users, the world, collectively decide it is. So, what will that be?
Hey, if you got something out of this explainer and it helped you make a little more sense of things, do me a favor and hit that like button, share it with a friend, and make sure you subscribe to Crypto Explorer 24/7. Thanks so much for watching.
So let's just get right to it. Are Bitcoins real? It's probably the number one question you hear, right? And you'd think it's a simple yes or no, but, well, the answer is way more interesting than that. It actually makes you question what real even means when it comes to money. All right, let's try a little thought experiment. Right now, picture a Bitcoin. What do you see? I'd bet good money you're picturing something shiny, right? Something physical you could hold in your hand. Yeah, for almost everyone, it's that iconic gold-plated coin. You know the one, with the big B stamped right in the middle. I mean, we've seen it a million times in photos and articles. It just looks like money. It looks solid, valuable, it looks real. Okay, but here's where we pull back the curtain, and this is a big deal. That coin, it's completely fake. It's a prop, a souvenir, a novelty item. There is no physical Bitcoin. Never has been. You can't put one in your pocket or lock it in a vault, which begs the question, what in the world are people actually buying? So let's get into it. What do you actually own? This is the digital truth. At its very heart, Bitcoin is just data. It's an entry on a giant shared spreadsheet called the blockchain. And this isn't just one spreadsheet on one computer. No, it's a public ledger that's copied and updated across a massive network of computers all over the globe. It's totally decentralized. So here's a great way to think about it. Ditch the idea of a coin in your pocket. Instead, picture a global digital notebook. The cool thing is, anyone can look at this notebook, but nobody, not a bank, not a government, nobody can alter the entries without everyone else knowing. So when you own a Bitcoin, what you really own is a secure, unhackable record in that notebook that says you do. It's a provable digital fact. So where do new Bitcoins even come from? Well, that's a process called mining. It's pretty wild. Basically, all the recent transactions get bundled together in a block. Then, powerful computers all over the world, these are the miners, they all compete in a massive race to solve an incredibly complex math problem. The first one to solve it gets to validate the block, add it to the blockchain, and, here's the prize, they're rewarded with newly created Bitcoin. It's what keeps the whole thing secure and running. And what's so fascinating is how this digital mining is a lot like actual gold mining. Think about it. Both take a ton of effort, a ton of resources, and a ton of money. One is physically hard, the other is computationally hard. But here's the kicker. Just like there's only so much gold on Earth, there's a hard cap on Bitcoin. only 21 million will ever exist. And that scarcity, that built-in rarity, is a huge part of what gives it value in the eyes of many. So this whole scarcity thing kicks off a massive debate. Is Bitcoin real money, or is it more like digital gold? One country actually put this to the test in the real world. Back in 2021, El Salvador did something incredible. They made history by becoming the very first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, right alongside the US dollar. I mean, think about that. Suddenly, you could legally pay for your groceries, your gas, anything with Bitcoin. This was the ultimate stress test. The idea behind it was actually pretty powerful. Bring financial services to the huge chunk of the population, like 70%, who didn't have bank accounts. And the initial uptake was nuts. More people downloaded the Bitcoin wallet than had a traditional bank account. But it wasn't a smooth ride. Public opinion polls showed that a lot of people were against it. And then the story took a sharp turn. In January 2025, as part of a deal with the IMF, the law was rescinded. Just like that, the experiment came to an end. Okay, so if the real money experiment had a complicated ending, what about that other idea, the digital gold theory? Is that what Bitcoin really is? A place to park your wealth in the digital age? And when you put them side by side, you can really see why people make this comparison. They share some key traits, right? Both have a limited supply, both are difficult to produce, and both are seen by some as a safe haven when the economy gets shaky. But the differences are huge. Gold is, a physical thing you can hold. It's been valuable for centuries and is pretty stable. Bitcoin is just code. And its value, it can go on a roller coaster ride in the span of a few hours. So not exactly the same. All right, so another huge piece of this is it real puzzle is legality. Is this stuff even legal? And the answer? Well, it's all over the place. I mean, just look at this map of regulations. It's a total mess. Here in the US, it's legal, but the IRS calls it property, meaning you've got to pay capital gains tax. Over in the UK, it's legal but regulated. Then you have China, where it's just banned, flat out illegal. And in India, it's legal, but get ready for a whopping 30% tax on your profits. It really shows you how much an asset's reality depends on what the local government decides. Okay, but we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the big argument against Bitcoin, the skeptic's view. Is this whole thing just a massive bubble waiting to pop? This quote I saw on Reddit really nails the argument. It says Bitcoin is a product with no final buyer, only purchased by investors with the intent of selling it for a profit. Think about that. The idea is that nobody buys it to do anything with it, they just buy it hoping to sell it to someone else for more money. And this gets to the core of the criticism, intrinsic value. When you buy, say, a share of Apple stock, you own a tiny slice of a real company that makes iPhones and generates billions in profit. But critics said a Bitcoin has none of that. There's no company behind it, no profits, no dividends. In a traditional sense, there's nothing there to give it value. This whole idea is called the greater fool theory. And it's a bit brutal, but the logic is simple. You buy something not because it's worth anything, but because you're betting you can find a greater fool to buy it from you at a higher price. And that person is betting they can find an even greater fool, and on it goes, until you run out of fools. And that's when the bubble pops. All right, we've been through the technology, the real-world drama in El Salvador, the legal maze, and the bubble theory. So let's land this plane. Are Bitcoins real? So the answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's more like, it depends on how you define real. Digitally, oh yeah, 100% real. It's a genuine, secure entry on a worldwide ledger, no question. Legally, well, that's complicated. It's real property in one country, illegal contraband in another, and it was even real money for a little while. And financially, the value is definitely real. People are paying real dollars for it. But that value is built on something pretty abstract, collective belief. And that is why it's so incredibly volatile. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. It leaves us with this big, mind-bending question. In a world that's becoming more digital every single day, what actually makes anything real? Is it something you can physically touch? Or is real just whatever enough of us decide has value? Woo, that's a lot to think about, right? If you love digging into these kinds of questions and exploring the wild world of crypto, then please do us a solid and hit that like button, share this with a friend, and definitely subscribe to our channel, Crypto Explorer 24/7. We'd love to have you. Thanks for watching.
What if I told you that you could make money, like actual money, just by letting an app run on your phone. That is the incredible dream being sold by Bitcoin mining apps. We're talking passive income supposedly being generated right there in your pocket.
But hold on a second. It sounds a little too good to be true, doesn't it? I mean, can your smartphone, the same one you use to scroll through social media, really just create valuable Bitcoin from nothing? Well, that's the million-dollar question we're going to tackle right now.
Okay, so let's dive right in. To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to separate the myth from the reality. We need to look at what these apps claim to do versus what actual industrial-scale Bitcoin mining really is.
So before we can even talk about the apps, we need a quick crash course in what real mining is. See, most people think it's just about making new coins, but its actual job is way, way more important. Mining is what secures the entire Bitcoin network. It validates all the transactions. Miners are basically the security guards and the accountants for the whole system.
And that security system is called proof of work. You can think of it as this giant worldwide lottery that's happening every 10 minutes. To win the right to add the next batch of transactions to the ledger, miners have to prove they've done a ton of computational work. How? By being the first one to solve an absurdly difficult math problem. This whole setup makes it practically impossible to cheat the system.
So here's how that race looks, step by step. First, all the recent transactions get bundled together into a block. Then, computers all over the world start racing to solve that block's unique puzzle. The very first one to crack the code gets to add their block to the chain. And for all that hard work, bam, they get the reward, brand new Bitcoin.
So if you want to compete in this global race, what kind of gear are you going to need? Well, let's put the computer in your pocket head-to-head with the absolute monsters that were built just for this.
Believe it or not, back in the very early days, you could actually mine Bitcoin on a regular desktop computer. But as Bitcoin got more valuable, a technological arms race kicked off. Today, the game is dominated by something called ASICs. These are machines designed to do one single thing: solve these mining puzzles at lightning-fast speeds. It's like building a race car that can only turn left. It's not versatile, but it's unbelievably good at what it does.
And when I say it's an arms race, I mean it. We're talking about massive warehouses, sometimes the size of football fields, just packed with these machines running 24/7. They eat up a mind-boggling amount of electricity. In fact, the entire Bitcoin network uses as much energy as some medium-sized countries. This isn't a hobby anymore. It's a huge global industry.
Which brings us right back to our original question. Looking at these massive, power-hungry operations, how on earth is a tiny little app on your phone supposed to compete? It's like bringing a go-kart to a Formula One race.
All right, so here's the big reveal. What's the secret? Well, it's pretty simple. The apps aren't actually using your phone to mine anything. They're basically just a digital storefront for something else that's happening hundreds or thousands of miles away.
So let's be crystal clear. The short answer is it can't. Your phone's processing power compared to a real mining rig is, well, it's a whisper in a hurricane. It has zero chance of winning that race. So if the app isn't mining, what is it doing? Well, it's selling you access to a service.
The most popular model is something called cloud mining. Here's the deal. You aren't mining yourself. You're basically renting a small piece of a giant professional mining farm. You pay them a fee, and they handle all the expensive hardware, the massive electricity bills, and keeping everything cool. In return, you get a cut of whatever Bitcoin their whole operation earns.
A similar concept is a mining pool. Think of it like a lottery pool you'd run at the office. Instead of buying one ticket and having almost no chance to win, everyone chips in. The group buys 1,000 tickets, and suddenly your odds are much better. When the pool wins, the prize gets split among everybody. Your mining app is basically just your entry ticket into one of these giant digital pools.
Okay, so now we know the how. But that brings up another question. Why? Why are people going to all this trouble to mine Bitcoin in the first place? Well, the motivation is baked right into Bitcoin's design. And you know what? So is the risk.
I want you to remember one number, 21 million. That's it. That's the absolute maximum number of Bitcoin that will ever exist. It's a hard limit coded right into the system. This scarcity, just like with a precious metal like gold, is what gives it value. A government can't just decide to print more of it and cause inflation.
But there's another side to this coin, and you have to hear it. This quote really gets to the heart of the risk. See, when you buy a stock, you own a piece of a company that makes things or provides services. The argument against crypto is that it doesn't produce anything on its own. Its value, critics say, is based entirely on being able to sell it to someone else for more money down the line. It's a really intense debate.
So let's put this all together.
What's the bottom line here? It's time for a little reality check so you know exactly what you're looking at with these apps. All right, here are the 4 key things you've got to remember. Number 1, and this is the big one, you are not mining Bitcoin on your phone. It's a myth. Number 2, these so-called mining apps, they're really just portals, gateways to cloud mining companies or pools. 3, actually making a profit is a whole different story. It all depends on how much you earn versus all the fees they're charging you. And finally, number 4, real mining is an industrial business that takes a huge investment in specialized gear.
So you see, the question we started with, are these apps legit? It's kind of the wrong question. The real question, the one you should be asking, is about the service behind the app. Are they totally transparent about their fees? Can you actually verify that they have the mining power they claim to have? And after they take their cut, is it even possible for you to make a profit? That's where you got to do your homework.
Hey, if this explainer helped you cut through some of the hype and understand what's really going on, do us a huge favor. Hit that like button, share this with a friend, and make sure you subscribe to Crypto Explorer 24/7. We're here every week breaking down the complex world of crypto to give you the straight facts. Thanks for watching.